All right, welcome to another edition of the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. I was kind of iffy if I was going to do one tonight. We're having some issues here at the house. I think our air conditioner, we've got 3 units that power our house. And the one on this end of the house seems to be dragging a little bit. So you can see a little bit of sweat on me. It's a little hot. We just about a month ago had the coil replaced in it, and I'm going to have them come back out on Monday and check that just to see if the freon level is low. But I wanted to do a short podcast. I don't know how long I'll be on here tonight, but there's been several things I wanted to talk about. Just put some notes up here. The first thing is this stuff going on with America 250, with the artists that are pulling out and not saying that it's either based on threats. They didn't know it was going to be this political. I think all of that's hogwash. I don't think that's true. Some people might question, why would President Trump have somebody contract with these people to come up and present or sing or whatever they're going to do for the America 250 stuff, and then have them pull out here almost at the last minute? Well, what if it's genius? Maybe he knew all along that these people were a bunch of woke individuals that were going to succumb to their mob mentality of, hey, I can't do this because I'm going to get, castigated by the left. I think it's a great opportunity, and I always try to look for opportunities in things. And this is a great opportunity for other performers to do well, while people like Martina McBride end up Bud Lighting themselves, if it's okay to use that phrase. So I looked here on X, and Katie Pavlich, that used to be with Fox News, now she's with News Nation. I think she used to be with townhall.com. I don't think she's doing that anymore. I'll have to ask my friend John Nance if she still has any active role there. But she posted about Martina McBride, and I thought it was really poignant when she talked about the fact that Martina McBride made all of this money off of the song Independence Day. And even Sean Hannity was using that as the opening to his show. And her statement here, it's ridiculous. It is pathetic, like Katie Pavlich says. I've never really been a fan of Martina McBride. I do like the song, Let Freedom Ring, or Independence Day song. I guess that's the name of it. I do like that. People often, when they look at these performers and they think that they have some type of insight or some into what people like, and that they actually like America. I remember it was after I was in high school. I was taking some classes in college, and Bruce Springsteen came out with his Born in the USA, and people were using that to kind of rally some freedom and stuff. But if you actually listen to the words of the song, it really wasn't celebrating the USA. It had a good beat to it. He tried to, pull in the red, white, and blue and blue collar type worker and stuff. And now we found out exactly what he's like. I'm going to make a prediction. I'm not usually one that tries to make predictions, but here's something I do think will happen. So the artists that are going to perform there, and one of those is Richard Van Winkle. And for those of you that don't know who that is, it's Vanilla Ice. It wasn't necessarily a one-hit wonder. He did have a couple of other hits, not as prominent as Ice Ice Baby. But I thought it was quite interesting how he embraced this opportunity for him to elevate himself in the eyes of the people like us that truly love America, and for him to embrace that and talk about it as well. And let's listen to just a little bit of him right now in an interview.
This just in. There's a situation. It's going down. America is turning 250. Come on, man. Let's go. I'm super honored to do this concert with everybody. We're going to bring back the 90s. Put your dancing shoes on. You'll be happy. Trust me. It's all about enjoying the great times of 250 years, man, from George Washington to now, and all the presidents and everybody in between. This is a magical event that's going to happen, and very rare. So I'm honored, man. This is going to be epic, and that's it. We don't take anything too serious, man. We're going to bring the 90s. That's how it works. Go Ninja, go Ninja, go. So we're going to turn everybody into a teenager for the night. Proud to be an American, and proud and honored for this event. So get in where you fit in, and we'll see you there. Holla, holla. Go Ninja, go Ninja, go.
That is awesome. And I agree with Donald Trumpo on his post on there that this is how it's done. That is how it's done. You're going to see, I think Vanilla Ice might end up with the replay of his song, sort of like the Village People in YMCA, and they ended up embracing the fact that Trump was elevating that. Vanilla Ice may see a resurgence of Ice Ice Baby, and you might see it actually climb the charts again. He might make more money in the next, I don't know, 6-8 months than he made in the last 35 years. It is going to be amazing to watch how this plays out. So about the America 250. So I'm old enough that I was there for the bicentennial. I was in the 6th grade at Skyland Elementary School, and we did a huge celebration of the bicentennial in 1976. And this was, just before Jimmy Carter was coming in office. President Ford was there. But it wasn't about politics. We did some singing. We retired an American flag that had been flying there at Skyland Elementary School. And we put all these things in a time capsule and buried it out by the flagpole. I don't know when it was dug up. I did stop into the school. I mean, it's been a long time ago, probably 20 years ago. I stopped in and asked them about it. And some of the people there thought it had been dug up, this time capsule that would have had pictures of me and my friends and us singing and stuff at the bicentennial. So now here we are, fast forward to 250. I'm still here. Here is something really interesting. When we hit 300, so when it hits 350 years, so that would be 2076. I'm not saying I will be here, but it is possible. There's some longevity, especially on my dad's side of the family, of people reaching into the triple digits. So it would be kind of interesting if you saw me on television talking about the fact that I was there for 200, 250, and the 300. I'd be 112. So it could happen. We'll see. We will see. We will see. The other thing I want to talk about is this Graham Platner thing. I don't think the guy's got a snowball chance in Hades of winning against Susan Collins. I don't think that the moderates that are there, the people that have been keeping Susan Collins in office, are going to abandon her for a guy with a Nazi tattoo that attacked a veteran Purple Heart recipient. I just don't see it happening. I don't care what the polls tell you or anything like that. Now, I'm no fan of Susan Collins. I don't like people that come out and say one thing and do another. And when she first ran for Senate, she said, I'm only going to be here 6 years. And then she was there 12 years and then 18 years. She just keeps going with this. It would be very difficult for a hardcore left candidate to win in Maine, just as much to be a hardcore right candidate to win there. The best we're going to get is Susan Collins. The best thing I can say about her is she's not Lisa Murkowski. At least she is willing to help out when it counts, like with Supreme Court justices and stuff. But I did see an interesting interview of the Purple Heart recipient. And this is another way of how it's done. This dovetails into what we're seeing going on with Jackson Dart and this Abdul kid that I've never really heard of. I don't really follow NFL football anymore. It got too woke during the Colin Kaepernick, Black Lives Matter stuff. It really just kind of turned me off to it. I think that I think that the way that they're handling it is totally wrong. I don't want to hear from this Abdul guy. There shouldn't have been a controversy there. There wasn't a controversy when other players like Lawrence Taylor, uh, went and championed some things that Trump was doing. So it almost seems every time that Abdul speaks out, I just saw Jameis Winston speak out, and he tried to bring in some history from Alabama. We are both from Alabama. The difference between me and Jameis Winston is I was alive when a lot of this stuff was going on in the 60s and the 70s, and he wasn't there. He's just a kid compared to me. So when he brings up, the church bombing, they call it a church burning, but it was really a bombing. And, when we start having these images of people like Bull Connor, who was the public safety commissioner in Jefferson County, where Birmingham, Alabama is located. He's the one that famously turned the fire hoses on blacks in 1963. The one thing that the four individuals that were tied to the murders of those little girls and the church bombing in Birmingham and Bull Connor, the commonality there is they're Democrats, hardcore Democrats. And it just, Jameson has had enough problems in his life. He doesn't need to come out and try to be some of this hero or something. I totally disagree with some of the people out there that I do respect, like Brandon Tatum and others that are trying to say, here's Jameson trying to bridge the gap. There's no gap to be bridged. Quit trying to make it a gap. But anyway, I thought it was interesting the way that the Purple Heart recipient responded to this. And he did so professionally. And he didn't make it about himself. I'm going to let you listen to it right here, this interview that was done with him, and just watch. It's a master class on how you handle something like this.
I can't even say that I was upset. I'm upset about the comments that he made about Chris Kyle. But, Chris Kyle has kids. He's not here to defend himself. I have kids. And, with people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders backing this man, I want them. I want Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders my youngest is 8. He turns 9 in a couple days. To tell my kids that they're supporting a man who said their father didn't deserve to live. I mean, think about that. That's the issue there. It's just sad that somebody like this is being considered for a position in leadership in the United States Senate.
Excellent way of putting it out there. It's not about him. It's how do these people that support Platner, how are they going to respond to questions from this man's kids saying, this guy wanted my father dead, said that he was a loser, and it is ridiculous. And we see this sometimes from people in the media. I think to try to look at it from another positive standpoint, I think that a lot of this stuff that we're seeing today with Platner, with what's going on with Martina McBride, with Brett Michaels, with the people that are pulling out of the America 250, is we're really finding out who is who. And that's one of the things that I pointed out recently with the John Cornyn loss over in Texas. Those of you that follow me know that for a while now, I've been posting, today is this date. John Cornyn has this many days left in his political career. After that, we're going to find out who he is based on if he puts his support and endorsement behind Ken Paxton. And I want to compliment him. He did do that. I was kind of surprised that he did that. I also saw people like Hugh Hewitt out there that were adamantly against Paxton, but they did get it. He did get in line, and he immediately came out and supported Paxton. Even John Thune probably reluctantly came about and supported Paxton. Now we'll see if what happens with the money situation there from the senatorial reelection campaign committee, if they're going to put funds into PACs and things like that to try to help Paxton. I don't think Paxton's going to need that much help. I keep hearing all these stories about Tallarico is going to be within a few, he's leading Paxton in the polls. Again, I don't like predictions, But I'll throw this one out there. I think Paxton wins by 15 plus points against Talarico. I just don't think that Texans are going to embrace a vegan that talks about six genders. The guy is weird. I just don't see that happening, and there's not enough enthusiasm from the left to come out and support him. Same thing with Platner. I agree with Bill Shipley. He's the guy, shipwreck crew out there, and I've seen some other people parrot this. I think Platner is going to be set up to remove himself from the nomination. The party's going to tell him that they're not going to help him out behind the scenes, and that's typically the way it works out. The party ends up figuring out who the candidate's going to be. If you think when you decide to run for office that you're on the Republican ticket, that you've got any chance in running against an incumbent, the state parties aren't supposed to pick and choose between the candidates that are running on that ticket of that party, but they do. There's ways around it, and the things they do. It becomes more difficult for somebody trying to seat an incumbent to get on certain media. There's ways that they can do that. I know that from experience and things that I've seen here in Mississippi. Remember, I quietly, after I retired in 2019, just kind of stayed in the background and made some observations. And then it wasn't until all of this overreach of COVID in 2020 that I just started asking questions. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, about the way that I handle things. While I got you here, I do want to give a shout out to the Conservative Voice. It is WWDB out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they're on Fridays from noon to 2 Eastern, 11 to 1 my time, Central Time. I really like them there. The two main main hosts are Gary Heasley. He runs the Conservative Voice account, and he's the main host. You'll see him often on there. You'll see him here in just a second because I'm going to play a video of him. And then my good friend Ada Nestor, and prayers going out for Ada Nestor. She's had some medical issues here recently, hoping she's going to get back in the fight. You can find Ada Nestor on Substack. She has some amazing writing that's on there. President Trump has actually tweeted or truthed her article, one of her articles that she had out there on Substack. But Conservative Voice is a great outlet. They've got a lot of things that they work on up there in Pennsylvania, and I'll let Gary talk about it here in just a second. It is worth listening to on Fridays. Just some basic common sense talk. I've been on their show a number of times. I've been on there as just the single guest. One of the first times I was on there, I was on with Emerald Robinson, and man, that was a hoot. Because she was ripping into the FBI, and then here I come along saying, "Hey, some of the things you're saying aren't quite true." I know because I was there over 20 years, so that was kind of fun. Emerald and I disagree on a lot of things, but I will give her credit. When I was guest hosting on local radio here, she agreed to come on and do a segment with me, and we just basically kind of kept it easy. But here's Gary talking about how we can save America. And that's what we're going to get into in this next segment before we call it a day.
You're getting to a point that we've got to hit on more and more and more, which is that the only force in the world with the power to save this country is the American people. It's the same in Philadelphia. We were talking with Mina in the first segment about the problems of it. The only group in the world with the power to save this country is the American people. And if we remain silent and inactive and obsessed with
Yeah.
the NFL, I don't know, whatever it is, we're going to lose the country. We're losing our schools, right? They're performing at 34%. They're extremely expensive, massive budgets, huge amounts of spending, politically active, changing what your kids do, what they see, what they learn, and parents aren't acting. We have to get people off the couch. So we got to find a way to do that. Now, Charles, you and I are part of a thing called the Pennsylvania Patriot Coalition, which is a group of independent groups across the Commonwealth. And we're going to try to get that group more focused on taking these kinds of actions, doing the things you just said, calling the White House, calling others and saying, hey, our voices must be heard, calling people in state roles and saying our voices must be heard. But we'll only be heard in numbers. If 5 people call, nobody cares. If 50 people call, a state representative takes notice. So that's kind of important.
All right, I agree with Gary there. On the state representative level, 50 people call there, it means something, because if 50 people are calling, that means that there's probably uh, 500 people that feel the same way that aren't calling. And in these small races at the state level, you can have individuals can lose races based on 50 to 500 people. So it's really important with them. Trying to call your representatives in DC. If you notice, they have multiple offices. I've had this experience when trying to speak with my U.S. senators, Roger Wicker and Cindy Hyde Smith. Is when you call their office, they're like, okay, well, I've got my Jackson office, I got my Gulfport office, I got my Oxford office, got my DC office, and trying to nail down where you can actually get information to them. I think that's by design. It makes it difficult. And the staff acts as an insulation between the citizens and the elected representative. So what are you going to do about it? How can you get access to these individuals? How can you make an impact? So last week I was on the radio with Andrew Gasser on WYB. If you go to my YouTube channel, the Blunt Force Conservative YouTube channel, well, let's see, I don't think it's there, but if you search for it on my X feed, um, you just look for Andrew Gasser, just search under my feed under the Chris Hinkle. If you do that, you'll see some conversations that we had, and we had a caller that called in and said, "Oh, well, it's all great and all that, you guys are on the radio and you have, this extra access to these individuals, and just it's not fair to us." And what I was trying to get across to the guy was, well, listen, I'm just like you. I'm just a citizen here. I'm a retired guy from the FBI. Yeah, I've had some opportunities to guest host, but I didn't start out that way. I started out by doing things like going to the school board meeting, listening to what they had to say, asking questions and asking follow-up questions. A lot of that happened during the COVID overreach. Uh, because civil rights is near and dear to my heart. I ran the FBI civil rights program in Mississippi as a supervisor in the early 2000s, had some significant cases, actually supervised the reopening of Mississippi burning. You have that Mississippi burning that you see from the movies. And even some other cases where we went after the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. We had, a same-sex couple that was brutally attacked by some state law enforcement individuals, and we worked the case on that. And those guys got a year. We took care of it because it was a violation of civil rights. I wasn't looking at it from a political standpoint or even anything dealing with same-sex marriage that these two individuals were involved in. It was about what's right and what's wrong. It was a violation of 18 U.S.C. 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. The guys misused their authority as law enforcement officers to deprive these individuals of their civil rights. And the FBI is the only one that can investigate that. We are the sole investigator for violations of, civil rights violation of color law. So what can you do? So I started going to the school board meetings. That's how I met a guy that was a host at one of the local radio stations. He invited me on to ask. I was on there for about 2 hours as they were talking to me about my FBI career, things I've been involved in. That led to later on being asked if I would guest host. I then started getting some speaking engagements. I had an opportunity to speak before there was a big thing here going on with the Mississippi Department of Education when they were trying to change some of the standards to incorporate DEI into the school curriculum in the state of Mississippi. And we had probably about 300 people show up at the Ag Museum here in Jackson, Mississippi. They selected 60 people that had signed up to speak, and I was one of the 60. So I got a chance to speak, and we were able to make a difference and make some changes. We did the same thing with the school boards and getting them to overturn some of these unconstitutional COVID restrictions, getting some of these obscene and pornographic materials out of the schools. That led to me getting invited by people that were already attending. It wasn't like I was being invited by the host to there was like a Republican luncheon that happens here the first Wednesday of the month. There's one coming up this Wednesday. They call it Grip and Grin. And I went to the Grip and Grin. And I always try to stay knowledgeable of what's going on in the media, try to keep up with things. Really sparks my interest when it dovetails into the Constitution. And the way I look at it, everything that our representatives do involves the Constitution. So I had a chance to hear my congressman speak, and that was Michael Guest. And I'm listening to the things he's talking about on stage, and he's talking about how he's got 100 A+ rating from National Right to Life League, about his stance on abortion, and that he talked a little bit about, government spending. He talked about January 6th. I knew from my just even casual reading that Michael Guest was one of the 35 Republicans that voted for the January 6th commission. The thing that Benny Thompson was on, that Liz Cheney was on. That J6 commission. He's one of the guys that voted for it. So I was talking to somebody from his staff and a guy that I knew through law enforcement, and I was asking him some questions, and he couldn't answer the questions, and they weren't hard questions. They were about things that the congressman was talking about on the stage. So when his guest was wrapping up, the guy asked me, "Hey, you just want to talk to the congressman?" Sure, I'll talk to him. So he came off, we had some pleasantries, and then I just started asking questions. And I asked questions based on things he was just talking about. So it's not a gotcha question. First thing it dealt with was abortion. Hey, you voted, you just told me you got an A+ rating from National Right to Life League. And I said, but you voted to fund Planned Parenthood. Help me reconcile that. And I mentioned on the radio the last time I was on that if I was elected to Congress, a poison pill that you could put into any bill would be an abortion funding abortion. If you put that in there, I don't care if the bill cures cancer tomorrow, not voting for it. It's not worth sacrificing a life to do that. So when I asked it, asked him about that, he said, well, if I'd have voted against the bill, the government would have shut down. And this is where I know 100% that God exists, because he takes care of fools and idiots. I think I fall into both of those categories, I tell people. But it just seemed like everything just kind of flowed calmly. I often stay just pretty calm. It's hard to get me riled up where I'm just angry and throwing things and stuff like that. I'm just not that way. I'll yell. I may get a little vocal. I may elevate my tone when needed. I may use some sentence enhancers. I shouldn't be, but the way that I look at it is I just kind of listen to what somebody has to say. I think about it for a second, and then I go, okay, I need some clarification on this. So when he said government would have shut down, I said, okay. I said, well, unlike you, because members of Congress, their pay doesn't stop during a government shutdown. Just everybody else's that works for the government. And I was in government for 33 years. Part of that in the U.S. military, 20 plus of it with the FBI. I said, Congressman, I've been a part of a number of government shutdowns. The last one I was involved in was about a year before I retired, and we were shut down for about 2 months, and I didn't get paid for 2 months. I said, but you know what all of those shutdowns had in common? And he said, what's that? I said, man, they were all temporary. But what Planned Parenthood does is permanent. He couldn't answer. And that wasn't my goal, was to, try to just knock him off his, cut him off at the ankles. The goal was to get him to think. I talked to him about support for Ukraine, having worked counterintelligence for a number of years in the FBI, and part of my time in the Air Force as an Air Force Office Special Investigations agent. I knew that the government of Ukraine is, and will continue to be the most corrupt government on the face of the earth. There is no government that's more corrupt. Why do you think the Bidens, the Pelosi's, were involved in a lot of the gas and oil stuff that was going on in Ukraine? It was an opportunity for them to launder taxpayer monies. I hope that the Trump team is able to uncover some of that stuff, but it is an opportunity for them to, we should not be funding that. And that doesn't make me a Putin apologist or anything like that. I think Putin's a despot and should burn in the pits of 7 hells. But with what's going on in Ukraine, it's not a NATO issue. I don't want to see us get pulled into a war over in Europe. I don't think Ukraine should be part of NATO. NATO doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. And I think that would only inflame things even more, because as NATO grows, if I was sitting in Russia's shoes and I'm seeing this thing grow against me, I might get a little defensive as well. And the problem we have with Russia is they got nuclear weapons. I don't know if they would use them, but you never know. So you've got to take that into account. So what do you do to get the attention of these representatives? So mine has been asking questions. I still look back. I search through. I use Grok to do some searching. I think I'm the last citizen that actually stood up, raised my hand, and asked Roger Wicker a question, and that was in November of 2022, right before the elections. And Roger Wicker was he was touting that, hey, if the Republicans take over the Senate in January, then I'll be the chair of the Armed Services Committee, and all this money I'll be able to pull back to Mississippi. I got a problem with that because, and I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, he talked about that, and I said, "Okay, can I ask you a question?" He said, "Sure," right in front of about 200 people. I said, "Would you support?" There's clear violations of the Constitution that's going on in the Biden administration. I said, "Would you support impeachment of President Biden or even other of his cabinet members, guys like Mayorkas? Would you support that?" And he said, "No, I wouldn't." He said, "Because, I don't think we would get the votes in the Senate to remove them. And I think it's better to hold them accountable by the power of the purse." Problem with that: Republicans didn't win the Senate in 2022. What ended up happening is they had a bill, and if you go back and look in January 2023, before the Democrats turned the House over to the Republicans, they passed a bill that took the spending all the way to September. Now that took the teeth out of the incoming Republican Congress. It takes almost a year of budgeting away from them. They don't have any teeth in it then. And that bill not only gave things like Homeland Security under Mayorkas with the open borders and stuff, gave them the money they were asking for, actually gave them more money than they were asking for. So I can't figure out how to reconcile that's the power of the purse. I just don't understand that. So I've been on the hunt of trying to get in the same room with Roger Wicker so that I can ask him that follow-up question. How do you reconcile this as the power of the purse when you're giving them more money than they're asking for? Now, on that note, I have a problem with the money that Roger Wicker brings to the state of Mississippi, because you think slavery's gone. It is not. Definitely not in Mississippi. In Mississippi, we are a slave state. We are a slave to the federal government. I don't think any other state takes in as much more money than they send to the federal government. For every dollar that we send to the United States federal government, Mississippi gets back $2.47 to $2.66 for every dollar that we send in. So we make $1.47 to $1.66, roughly about $1.50 for every dollar that we send in, and we get dependent on that. It's sort of like giving a kid the credit card and they go out and they start spending, but they're not paying the debt down. They make the minimum payment. You get hooked on this stuff. And when you do that, there's strings attached to it. The government says you have to do this, this, or this. It's one of the reasons we need to get rid of one of the biggest strings out there and get rid of the Department of Education. And I got some problems with the Trump team on that. I want to find out from Linda McMahon, when is this thing going to get shut down? Let's shut down the Department of Education. Let's send everything back to the states and let them handle that. But in Mississippi, we've got to get more self-sufficient and not be dependent on federal government funds. And a way to do that, and I'm about to pull my hair out down here with Tate Reeves, our governor, and Delbert Hosemann, our lieutenant governor, is redistricting. We have an opportunity right now. Benny Thompson, the lead of that J6 committee, he is in District 2 in Mississippi. That district was drawn on predominantly racial lines in 2022 based on some federal court rulings that forced Mississippi to draw it that way, giving them about 4 more counties. Now, with the Calais decision down in Louisiana, we have an opportunity right now to correct that. So when Tate Reeves put out calling for a special session, initially he was going to redistrict the state Supreme Court districts, but he didn't say anything about District 2 with Thompson. At that time, Calais hadn't come out. When Calais came out, he pulled back the redistricting, withdrew their case on the redistricting with calling a special session to leave it up to the legislature. The only thing he needed to do was call a special session and direct Elbert Hoseman and the Republicans. And the Republicans have a majority in the Senate and the House in Mississippi, in the State House, to just get it done and put it on his desk. And they could do it pretty quick, but they're not going to. Tate Reeves said, I expect it to be done soon, between now and 2027, before 2028, when Thompson would be up for re-election. Well, excuse me, if the district was drawn predominantly on racial lines, and the district and Calais decision says you can't do that, it's unconstitutional because of the Equal Protection Clause in the Voters' Rights Act under the Constitution. So we've already had 2 elections and 3 primaries on that, and we're now getting ready to have another election with an unconstitutional district. Just call the special session. Now, the answer that they were giving was, we already had a primary. Well, guess what? Calais, that directly affected Louisiana, they had a primary right after that. You know what they did? They said, we're not going to count the votes from this primary. We're going to redo the primary. We're going to start it over. We'll have another vote. In less than 30 days from the Calais decision, they had their district lines redrawn. Mississippi could do the same thing, but they're not. I don't know why. Those questions are going to have to be asked. I haven't heard anybody in media ask them. I did get in a debate with a local media guy that claimed he's some kind of constitutional attorney, whatever that is. And he just lost horrifically on the debate stage, enough that he kept just starting new threads on X to try to get away from the fact that the argument that I was making about redistricting was stronger than his argument to say we shouldn't redistrict. He thinks we should just do it through lawsuits. Ridiculous. Well, anyway, before we close up here, here's one way that I did have an effect, and it wasn't here and I'm not claiming total credit for it, but it was from just little old me here in Mississippi. So if you remember Tom Tillis up in North Carolina, definitely not a MAGA guy. I would say he's Democrat, liberal, and he's going full liberal now, just slinging gasoline everywhere and lighting matches as he's on his way out of the Senate. But anyway, Tom Tillis was, before he decided to pull out of the race, I kind of did the same thing that I was doing to John Cornyn. With Cornyn, I would say, today's this day, Cornyn has this many days left in his political career, we'll find out who he is, blah, blah, blah. But with Tillis, I counted down and I just said, today's this date, Tom Tillis has this number of days left in office. That's all I said. But I was consistent in saying it. I got the numbers mixed up a little bit here and there. Sometimes I didn't get the correct math number from Grok or Google about how many days were left, but the sentiment was there. So I'm sitting here in my office, this office here at my house, and I get a call from this guy that he's a newspaper columnist in North Carolina, in Asheville, North Carolina, and he was asking me questions about. He said, "You keep putting this post," and started popping up on my feed, and I'm getting some questions from the Tillis campaign about you. And I'm like, for me, I never saw them say anything. They never retorted online about it. It was just kind of a quirk. I just kind of put it out there, but I was consistent in doing it. And he said, yeah, kind of got their attention. So this is the article right here from the Asheville Watchdog. You can look it up. Democracy Watch, Tillis strongest, loudest opponents in 2026 Senate race aren't Democrats. So if you pull that article up that Tom Fiedler wrote, you'll see me referenced in there a lot. It's quite interesting that I get these questions about it. And Tom was really surprised to find out I was from Mississippi. But it wasn't long after this that Tillis decided he wasn't going to run. There's no way in Hades he was going to win. He just wasn't. I think that Cornyn should have taken that same message. But I just thought it was interesting that he calls me about this. So for those of you that think you can't do this, you can. You just got to get past the nervousness. How can you do that? Stay informed, research, write things down, practice talking about them. The reason that I go in and I talk in the manner that I do, it took decades and decades to be able to get to that point. And I learned a lot from just listening to the cadence of people, the way that they ask questions, the fact that you actually take the time to listen to the person that you're interviewing. That's something that I still don't see in some of our main media ads. I can tell you in the media appearances that I've made, and I'm gonna post some of those. I'm working with my brother-in-law now who manages the media social media accounts. We're gonna look at posting some of those on the YouTube channel so you can see me out there on Newsmax, News Nation, Kimberly Guilfoyle's podcast before she went on to do her ambassador thing. My appearance on the Bill O'Reilly show, the no spin zone or whatever he calls it there on the first. But a number of these individuals, and I can tell you when you're in that arena, when you're being talked to, and it's not all of them, but it's a number of them. There are some really good ones out there that do listen to what you have to say. But I found that some of these hosts, when you're talking to them, they're just looking for the opportunity. They're just waiting for themselves to speak, talk about things that they want to say. They want to seem like the smartest person in the room. I get a little frustrated with that sometimes. You had me on for a reason, for my knowledge, skills, expertise in civil rights, law enforcement, things like that. You asked me to come on here to weigh in. I'm not getting paid for that stuff, so I don't really complain about it that much. But I do see that same thing happening when I watch CNN, when I watch some CBS, when I watch Fox News. I get frustrated when I watch people that don't know how to ask questions and ask follow-up questions or fail to ask follow-up questions. And a lot of that has to do is they're not listening to the guest. That can bite you sometimes. I did watch, there was one episode, Will Kane on, and I like Will. I think he's a good conservative. I think he's a good guy, Texan guy. He got crossways with Jack Keane, the 4-star general that's their military analyst. And you could tell that Will wanted to demonstrate his bona fides, his knowledge of the topic. And the way he was talking, it just really seemed kind of patronizing to the general. And the general picked up on that. And he's been around there longer than Will Kane has as a contributor. And he flat out told Will on his show, "Don't patronize me." And he told him specifically what he was doing. I thought it was a little rude. That's something I probably would have said off camera, but for some reason he said it on camera, and you could tell it was like a gut punch to Will Kane. I don't think he's been on Will Kane's show since then. But you do have the opportunity to make a difference. How can you do that? Start going to meetings. Go to your school board meeting. Go to your city council meeting. Go to your county board of supervisors meeting. I've spoken there a number of times. Get involved in the things that are affecting you. You have a First Amendment right to petition and seek redress of grievances with your elected representatives. They have an obligation under the Constitution, under that First Amendment, to listen to you, to talk with you, to address those grievances. If they are not doing that, they are abdicating their oath, and you need to point that out to them. Now, don't be coarse, don't be rude, don't be, just scream and yell. You're not getting anything across by doing that. Be civil, but be cogent. Know what you're talking about. And that way, when you ask that question and they give you an answer and it doesn't answer anything, point it out to them. I try to do this in front of other people. Now, you may ask, well, Chris, you don't sound nervous when you're talking about these things. I am nervous sometimes. Public speaking is the most terrifying thing that anybody can do. I think jumping out of an airplane would be more terrifying, but that's just me. But the way that I got across this was just being confident in my opinion and what I think. Now, I'm willing to have my mind changed. It's rare that it gets changed, but it does. So what I do is I think about how I'm going to ask the question. Now, this really helped me out when I applied for the FBI, because one of the things that you have to do toward the end is you go before a review panel of senior agents. And this, for me, this was the late 90s. I took the opportunity to take 2 cassette recorders, the old, push button cassette recorders, and I knew that the categories that they were going to pull questions from, and it was all based on life experience. Very little law enforcement questions. I don't think there were any. But what I did was I came up with about 15 to 20 questions that I thought they might ask. The majority of those questions that I came up with ended up being questions in somewhat that they asked. And I would tape myself asking that question, and then I would record myself answering the question. And I made sure I stuck with things, the same pattern. Situation, because they would ask you to tell you about a situation. What actions did you take as a result of that situation? What was the result of your actions? Situation, action, result. I did that over and over and over until I could get all of the nervousness out of my voice. And I think that helped me out when I went before the board, because it seems more genuine when you're speaking from the heart, kind of like I am now. I don't really have any notes. I've got 3 little lines written on a piece of paper in front of me just to keep up with the topics that we were talking about tonight. So I recommend doing that. Videotape yourself, your expressions. I try to get away from some of the things, my habits when I watch myself on video. I tend to say well a lot before, when I start into something, I go well and then talk. I'm trying to work that out. So I'm always trying to tweak that. But be genuine. Just ask the questions. And I can tell you, it does make a difference. I even had Michael Guest and I were cordial with each other. I don't have any animosity toward him. I just don't think he's a good representative. I think there could be better ones that are out there. Unfortunately, he's the one that we have, and still hasn't been able to answer that question about voting for J6 commission. But it brings, when you start asking those questions and you start making that impact, you're going to have people approach you. And that's another thing. My brother, he's younger than I am. He's 2 years younger than I am. He's going to be 60 here coming up in June. And one of the things he told me, he said, when you start talking the way that you do with me and my brother-in-law, who was on the podcast with me last Sunday, when you talk the way you're talking with us, he said, people are going to approach you. And that did happen. I had a group approach me about running for a local office here and, kind of getting me into that. I am involved a little bit in politics. Our supervisor here for my district asked me to sit on the Madison County Library Board. I had spoken before. Our sister city here, Ridgeland, Mississippi, the mayor there had asked me to speak when they were having some problems with some LGBTQ books that were being prominently displayed in the children's section of the library. And there were a number of complaints from citizens. It got some national attention. And the mayor there asked me to speak on that topic with them, and I told you earlier, I spoke before the Mississippi Department of Education. Take advantage of those opportunities to weigh in. People will approach you to do that. I've guest hosted on the radio. I've done these hits on television. I didn't seek that stuff out. It just kind of came to me. But don't get to the point that you think that you're so important that you kind of disregard those opportunities and the importance of those opportunities to convey your message. So take the time, go to these events, ask around, call your state party and ask them what events are coming up. Where do people go? Talk to, friends of yours. Hey, where do you guys go to hear, your representatives talk? When you be prepared with some questions in your pocket. So if you do bump into your representative at the grocery store, at the ball fields, at church, go up to them in the church parking lot and say, hey, how are you doing? Talk a little bit about the sermon. And then just say, hey, I got a question. Can you answer this for me? And then just ask your question. And if they say something that you agree with, tell everybody, hey, I talked to, Senator so-and-so, and he said this, and I kind of agree with what he said. I respect him for talking to me about that. If he says something you totally disagree, you tell everybody about that. If he pushes you away and doesn't, just has some disdain, or somebody gets between you and him, somebody from the staff, tell everybody about that. These guys don't like to have that negative attention drawn to them. And that, I think, is your opportunity to really make an impact. It's going to take us as citizens, as Gary Heasley said in that clip I played from the Conservative Voice. You have the power, and it's not just with the voting. It's with exercising that First Amendment right to petition and seek redress for grievances. It's one of the rights that when I do these quizzes with people about the Constitution, that's one of the ones that they neglect to remember. I just don't think they focus on it, and it is vitally important. Remember, the number one priority of every elected representative at the federal, state, and local level is to protect and defend your liberties according to the Constitution, those Bill of Rights. And if they're not doing that, nothing else matters. So you need to keep reminding them of that constantly. Well, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I still say it every time. I'm going to try to do these more, but every time I turn around, something pops up. Usually it's work with my private business. I'm trying to cut back here. I'm trying to make a determination if I'm going to go ahead and draw this Social Security and cut down a lot of this outside employment. I have to cut it way down so that I don't zero out the Social Security. And we've also got our granddaughter here, so we're spending a lot of time with her. And every time I say I'm going to pull back, God sends more work to me. I've got like a week and a half of work coming up here for a couple of law firms that just called me last week, and it pays really well. My rate's pretty high, but I do have a good core group of clients that keep coming back to me, and I do like doing this stuff. There is an opportunity out there, and I may take advantage of it if I do dive into this retirement stuff. You might hear me on the radio more. I've found that these podcasts that I do get some, I get reasonable numbers here. I'm not like big time or anything, but I have found that when I'm guest hosting on the radio and I podcast from there to the video podcast, get several thousand views on those. So I may take advantage of that. I got to talk to the station manager about some compensation and how that works. The model that they use is not something I'm enthused about. It takes too much effort on my part to be the host and a sales manager for the show. I'd rather give that to somebody else and just kind of come in and do my thing. But we will see. Pray about that for me. Again, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was informative. If it was, drop me a line. You can DM me on X, follow me on X, share X. I'm the Chris Hinkle on X. Search on YouTube for the Blunt Force Conservative. You'll find the podcast there. It's also on Rumble. We may try to add YouTube here. We're working on some opening credits and things like that. I've had some calls from some people that are looking for sponsorships. We'll see. Right now it's just something I do where I'll sit here during the day sometimes and I'll decide that hey, I got some things I want to talk about and I'll jump on here. I want to get more repetitive about that, but like I said, it's pretty busy. So thanks again for tuning in. I will see you next time. God bless the USA.